Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 10, Episode 80. He's Dave Bryan, Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being with us this Friday, Steelers Nation. Dave, what's going on?
Oh, not much. Just another Friday here. Got the combine starting next week and all, so starting to get back heavy into that draft mode, and looking forward to filling up some spreadsheets with you next week.
It is our hobby. Yeah, it's going to be in primetime next week, huh?
Yeah, that's going to be different for sure. Personally, I don't know. I think you obviously like it being a little bit later, or being later in the day this year. I kind of liked it kind of being a little bit early there. But look, I mean, they're trying to sell some TV time, right? And trying to get more eyeballs in front of the TV on NFL Network. So I understand why they're doing it. We'll just have to get used to it here.
Right. Two quick notes related to those things and to today in general. Kevin Colbert will speak at the Combine Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Correct me on that?
Yes, that's tentatively scheduled. I mean, it should be there, but at that time there. But obviously, those things can change.
Right. And the other news of the day, of this day in particular, is today, Friday the 21st, is the day that Ben Roethlisberger has his checkup with doctors out in California. Don't know when we may hear news of how that went. If we will hear, I imagine there will be some sort of statement issued by the team or by Ben. Of course, with Colbert talking on Tuesday, we'll certainly be asked about how that visit went. But today, as Tomlin said earlier in the offseason, a significant day for Ben in his rehab process.
Yeah, and once again, I think the next little piece of info, will potentially be us hearing from Kevin Colbert on early next week about how maybe that. All we're probably going to hear is so far so good continued.
Right.
I don't think we're going to get a lot of hard, fast information as far as how it went. Just that, everything's on track here, and maybe Kevin Colbert will tell us that he's got clearance to begin throwing some tennis balls and other light objects.
Mm-hmm. But that's the news I want. I just want to hear progression, that he's in the next step of the process to begin throwing. Of course, it would be huge, even if it is small. That would seem to put him on track for throwing by OTAs and then being good to go for camp. So if that's good news, even if it's small, I'll certainly take it.
Absolutely.
All right, Dave. It was funny where I was listening back to Tuesday's podcast, and I said at the top of the show, I'm sure that the news of the receiver coach will happen as soon as the podcast ends. I was slightly wrong about that. It happened as we were ending the show, so we kind of snuck the news in there with the Steelers announcing they hired Ike Hilliard to be the wide receiver.
It's because I ramble sometimes.
It worked well Tuesday.
It elongates the show by a little bit there, so yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we got just to kind of talk about it really, really briefly in the last 5 minutes of Tuesday's show. So now we've had a couple of days to digest the news. Do you have any other reaction to the hiring of Ike Hilliard? First of all, it's just surprising because we all thought it was Cotchery versus McClendon, and then here comes Ike Hilliard. But what's your reaction?
Yeah, and it goes back to saying sometimes all you can go with is the names that are out there, and as I think I eloquently did or not eloquently did say, look, maybe there's somebody else out there that we did not know about. Obviously, there was. It was Ike Hilliard. Why the Washington Redskins? They obviously had a changeover in head coach there, and who's over there now?
Ron Rivera.
Ron Rivera's wanting to bring in his own people, I'm sure, like that. But you could make a pretty good argument to say, man, I'm not so sure I would have kicked Ike Hilliard out the door over there. And long story short, all we know is what we know from out there. We're obviously not there in practices, don't know Ike Hilliard's coaching style. All we know is pretty much his resume and the things that he's gotten accomplished. Obviously, we know a little bit, a lot about his playing days and all like that as a wide receiver and all. But I think the further that you dig into this hiring, Alex, especially Ike Hilliard, the coach, there's not a lot not to like. Now, obviously, first season in Pittsburgh being 2020, we'll get a good idea of probably how effective he is and what kind of immediate impact he can make on this wide receiver crew, which by the way is going to be probably one of the youngest in the league, top to bottom, by the time it's said and done, especially if they add another draft pick to it there. But I think if you boil down just the thing that got me when kind of researching this stuff, and I don't know what other angle you've gone at it and what you have to add on it, because I haven't really seen you tweet about it or write too much terribly about it, is I think that the thing that got me is just looking back to last season with him. And we're only talking about one season here, but what he was able to do with three of the young wide receivers on that Redskins team. Talking about Terry McLaurin, which really, is it a huge shock that this kid did what he did during his 2019 rookie season? No, probably not. But somebody still has to point him in the right direction there. But the other two young wide receivers they had on that team, Steven Sims and Kelvin Harmon. Sims was an undrafted free agent, I think, out of Kansas, and Harmon was, I think, a 6th-round draft pick out of, where did he go to school at?
NC State.
Oh, NC State. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing that stuck out the most was that last season there were just 11 rookie wide receivers that registered 30 or more receptions and also had 300 or more receiving yards. And those three players I just mentioned, 3 of those 11 were those Redskins receivers, Terry McLaurin, Steven Sims, and Kelvin Harmon. Now, obviously, I think due to injuries and obviously poor production on that depth chart there was one of the reasons that Steven Sims and Kelvin Harmon was kind of rushed into action during mostly the second half of the season there overall. But the fact that those two kids had 30 receptions for over 300 yards on that team, that, make no mistake, they also had Haskins, having to see some time at quarterback there, a young quarterback there. I think that speaks volumes there. And on top of the fact that, boy, Terry McLaurin hit the ground running there. So, I hate to boil down Ike Hilliard's resume just to one season, but the old "what have you done for me lately" angle here, I thought that was just impressive in itself. And then obviously with those three kids being so young, all three of them rookies. In fact, I researched this as well too. Dating back to 2000, only one other team, the 2014 Jacksonville Jaguars, had 3 rookie wide receivers catch 300 or more passes and have 300 or more receiving yards. So I think that's quite an accomplishment. There's kind of it's a cherry-picked kind of accomplishment, if you will. But the fact, once again, that the Steelers are, got youngins there at wide receiver in Juju Smith-Schuster and obviously Deontay Johnson, James Washington. You look at a couple of these other young kids that were added late last season to the bottom of the depth chart, and then you throw in the potential of them having, maybe a rookie wide receiver in the form of a draft pick this year. I'd like the hiring of Ike Hilliard.
I think that's really well said. It's a great point about the youth and what he did last year in Washington and how that can apply to Pittsburgh. Yeah, it's possible that come week 1 of 2020, the oldest receiver in that room could be, 25, 26 years old, right? I don't know if the oldest would be Switzer, Holton, or older, but they're not guaranteed to make it. So, yeah, you throw in Kane and Darboh and Anthony Johnson, and probably someone new is going to be coming in the mix, whether that's a low-level free agent or more likely a draft pick. That's a really good point. I don't have a whole lot to add with Hilliard, and it's hard to research these things. I tried to find old coaching clinic tape of maybe these guys, but I just couldn't find anything out there. But I will say this, the other guys they were looking at, Cotchery, McClendon, younger guys, probably less experience overall, maybe less experience in the NFL level. Hilliard's been in the NFL for a long time. So I do appreciate having a guy that has a good amount of NFL experience where it's not Cotchery, no disrespect to him, but you just don't quite know how he's going to handle that full-time role, kind of being an assistant for the last 3 years, and that's it. So I like having a guy with a little bit of resume that still worked with a youthful group, and it still isn't, still pretty young guy himself too, talking about Ike Hilliard. So I kind of like that angle of getting someone with a little bit more experience than maybe Cotchery or McClendon offered.
Yeah, and I think you hit the key kind of points there, kind of molded together. Experience and Hilliard still being young enough to, I think, to be able to relate to the younger wide receivers here. And Mike Tomlin always talks about we're only as good at coaches as we are as good as we are teachers.
Right.
and the ability to communicate there. And I think if you go back and you look at some of Ike Hilliard's interviews, I think he comes off as a good communicator and potentially a good teacher in some of the kind of the recaps and all quick little minute and a half vignettes, I guess, on the Redskins website and all like that. So obviously we're going to try to cherry pick the positive that's out there on him, because it's hard to really pick up negatives overall based on what's out there in his coaching resume. But at least he does have a pretty extensive coaching resume here. And once again, I hate to boil it back down just to one year with him, but I think it was very much worth highlighting the work that he did last year with those three young wide receivers in Washington and what he was able to get out of them.
Absolutely, 100%. And I have to mention, because there's always seemingly some sort of Tomlin or Pittsburgh connection with most of these hires. And again, Hilliard was with Tampa in 2005, one of Tomlin's final years. I think his final year on staff when Tomlin was the DB's coach. So just having that little bit of familiarity, I think, helps as well.
Boy, Juju's head's probably spinning, isn't it?
Yeah,
what's this going to be? I mean, when he came into the league, it was Richard Mann.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously Daryl Drake, and then Richard Sherman. I mean, he needs a little bit,
Ray Sherman.
Ray Sherman. Yeah, I'm thinking.
You got CBA on the brain, don't you?
Yeah. Obviously Ray Sherman. I mean, look, he needs a little bit of stability there, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm sure it's been tough in a lot of ways these last 12 months in general. I'm sure have been very difficult for Juju, everything on and off the field. So hopefully some stability will do him a lot of good.
All right. I mean, once again, I don't know what there's to talk about that maybe you don't like about Ike Hilliard.
I mean, it's hard to really know. It's hard to evaluate these coaches. It's hard to evaluate anybody, but especially these positional coaches where their work's all done Monday through Saturday. But we'll see in camp what differences, in terms of the drills and things they do. We'll have a better kind of feel for maybe the type of coach he is, how vocal he is, or maybe how not vocal he is. I can't give a lot of insight now, but when I go up to training camp, we will probably give you a little better picture on the type of coach Ike Hilliard is.
All right, sounds good.
Okay, Dave, other big news of the day is everything related to the CBA. I know this is right up your alley, Dave. The NFL owners have voted to propose basically a new version of the CBA. Not every single owner apparently voted for it. We don't know what teams didn't. We know Pittsburgh was the only team not to vote for the previous CBA. But now it's in the players' hands, and it's seeming unlikely that they're going to pass this current proposal. You can kind of go through some of the highlights if you'd like, Dave, with talking about the expansions of the revenue sharing and some roster expansion proposals and things like that. But right now, players have to vote on it. It's going to start with the player reps, and if they get a 2/3 majority of that, then it will go to the players as a whole, and you get a simple majority to pass that, then the whole thing passes. But that seems unlikely right now.
What has you what has got you to the conclusion that it's not going to be ratified?
Well, just looking at some of the comments of guys like J.J. Watt and T.J. Watt, but then some reps like Richard Sherman, David Bakhtiari have all come out basically against this current proposal, trying to pump the brakes on this thing. So I don't know how it's going to go, but when I see some of the big faces of football like Richard Sherman and J.J. Watt say no, my feeling is that it's going to be reflected along the rest of the player reps.
Well, as you mentioned first, the player reps have to have a 2/3, I think a 2/3 passing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before it gets sent to the players to ratify it there. Here's the thing, and look, I mean, obviously we don't know everything that's in this. Late last night we got what they put out by the CBA proposal fact sheet, which is a summary of the key terms of the proposed CBA renegotiation. Just reading through most of those and understanding the parts that I think that I can understand. Once again, boy, you get into these things and there's a lot. You have more questions about these things than
Mm-hmm.
you do kind of answers when it comes. But I mean, I think a lot of these bullet points that they put on here are easy to understand there. Top to bottom, just looking at it, I don't think it's enough for the players. I really don't, because also we're going to talk a little bit more in this. We have to remember that there's going to be a 17, like it or not, there's going to be a 17 game schedule Probably not, obviously not this season, but potentially 2021, 2022. They're going to expand the playoffs. It's another little thing we're going to be talking about, here as part of this podcast today. But just the overall kind of gets that the players are getting here, I'm not quite sure if it's enough, and it's hard for me to put my finger on it and say specifically, well, if I would go for this or I would go for that. Look, I'm not part of the Players Association. I'm not a team rep, obviously not a player. All I can go off of is kind of what my knowledge of the current CBA is, and kind of the things I think the players should be requesting more of. But yeah, look, I mean, you look at the instant kind of reaction to some of these player reps out there, on social media, at least the most vocal ones. I mean, there's going to be some non-vocal ones out there as well, too. And it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Now, it sounds like they're going to need to get this thing either approved and ratified by the end of next week if there's going to be if the new CBA is going to be in place for the 2020 season. It sounds like if things aren't ratified, maybe by the time the combine week is over next week, that they have agreed, that both sides have agreed to continue on with what is the 2020 and or final year of the current CBA, and that obviously makes sense, But it will be interesting to see what transpires today, and I don't have a good feeling either way, other than just looking at kind of what you're looking at, kind of the vocal reps, if you will, and what their initial kind of reaction is to it. But we're going to find out real quick if this thing has a chance of being passed, I would think, by later on today.
Yeah, that's my assessment too. Ramon Foster, the Steelers rep, has been pretty quiet. I mean, he has tweeted some things, but not really coming out in favor or opposed to it. So
mostly at media members for chiming in on it, which, why the hell, to me, I think that's wasted breath on his part. He should be focused on with his other reps and trying to go. I mean, I understand why he's doing it, but look, I mean, that our job is to look at this stuff and speculate and analyze and things along that nature. Now, I think already, the NFL media side, the guys that work for the NFL Network and NFL.com and the Adam Schefters and the Ian Rappaports are kind of are being accused of being kind of the mouthpiece. The propaganda spreaders.
There's a spin to it for sure.
Right. This is great. The players will get this. The players will get that. And I think, I think people are kind of are running with that a little bit, today as well too. So we'll know by the end of the day.
Yeah, which I understand that aspect, because there's that worry that, the NFL is trying to make this look like the players are in the wrong if they reject this by trying. It's like a used car dealer coming up to you and you got a deal in 5 minutes. And it's like, whoa, this happened way too fast. We got to talk about this for a second. But let me just hit a couple of bullet points for if this gets passed, or the current proposal for the CBA, some of the changes that will be implemented. And again, this has to be, we're not even close to this thing being ratified and set in stone yet. But tweet from Adam Schefter a little while ago, rosters would increase to 48 players from 46 on game day, with overall rosters going from 55 to 55 from 53. Practice squads would increase to 14 players in 2022 and 12 this year, up from 10. Teams would be allowed to bring back 3 players from IR. Again, you can go in the 17-game schedule, which will probably happen for 2021. That would reduce a preseason game to be more limitations on training camp and padded practices and things like that. So a lot going on there with this new proposal. Again, my guess is that it's not going to pass. We'll see. But my feeling is that they're going to have some work to do and probably won't get a new CBA for a little while longer.
Well, here's the thing. If you're a Steelers fan, and look, I think they should, part of this new CBA should definitely include a larger game day roster. This insinuates that it would go from 46 to 48. I really think it should go a little bit high, a little bit more than that, to be quite honest with you. But we've heard Kevin Colbert talk about in the past why the number is that it is. It's the old competitive balance thing with the injury. So an increase of 46 to 48 might be perfect. However, going from a 53-man roster to a 55-man roster might not be enough. Maybe you need that a little bit, maybe even two. I understand what they did. They went two more on the active roster. They went two more on the actual game day roster. Maybe go three more with each.
Yeah.
But as you pointed out there, they would increase practice squads would increase eventually to 14 players. All that does is give a couple more guys work. I understand that, and that would go to 12 this year, and then up, which is obviously up from the current number, which is 10 right now. I understand the whole preface behind that. You just want more players to have jobs, if you will, even if they are kind of lower paying jobs on top of it. But I think there's a proposed raise in practice squad salary on top of it. Long and short of it, and look, I mean, it's not worth getting into some of these hard and fast bullet points because we might not be talking about it
right.
for it might not be approved, and if some of the parameters are changed, we'll have to go and rehash those all again and all like that. So I think the long and short of it is, if you're looking at it from a fan of the Steelers, you want this thing to get done somehow this next week, from the sheer fact that that the 30% rule would likely go away. And really, the only reason you're looking at this and hoping that it gets done in some way, shape, or form from a Steelers perspective is the salary cap aspect. By the 30% rule going away, would allow the Steelers to restructure some contracts and get more out of those restructures because of the 30% rule going away. It would also allow for, say an extension for a guy like Cameron Hayward to provide a little bit more cap relief this year than it would under the 30% rule. So really, that's the only reason Steeler fans would be kind of praying for this thing to get done. And we have the I think Matthew Marksey is highlighting some of these things in the CBA proposal fact sheet. But once again, we want to kind of move a little bit slower on this, because some of the terms might change and they might become irrelevant.
Right.
Talking about them a little bit more.
Yeah, once this thing gets approved by both sides, then we can kind of do a deep dive into what the changes are, and they're going to be significant changes no matter when this thing gets done. But until that point, it's probably a bit of a waste of time. But you're right. From a Steelers fan perspective, from a purely selfish fandom place, you want to get the deal done now, because that's going to really help alleviate some of the cap space issues and give this team more moves. I mean, for example, without a new CBA, you can only restructure Ben and make what is it, $3 million in terms of?
Yeah. I put up that post several weeks ago on that. You're not going to clear a hole, even if you went through and restructured the contracts and everybody that you could. You don't have a lot of. What did I say? Something like $9 million in total. I forget what the actual total was that they could potentially clear under the 30% rule in restructures. Whereas a little over $3 million of that would be Ben Roethlisberger. Whereas if the 30% rule went away, you could free up $9 million in a full restructure on Roethlisberger alone.
Right, that's the point. Yeah, if a CBA were to get done, you could basically take Ben to $9 or maybe even $10 million, and that would give you a whole lot of financial flexibility, at least more than what you're dealing with right now. So from that perspective, it'd be nice to see the deal get done, but of course, I'm always on the player's side. I want them to be able to get everything that's possible, every sort of benefit, every sort of advantage, every sort of pay increase. I'm all for it. So I would totally understand if they reject this proposal, but if just from a pure selfish Steeler fan's perspective, a deal getting done now is a good thing for Pittsburgh.
And look, I know enough about what's in this proposal right now to be dangerous, but I still don't know every aspect of it. Some of the finer details and things that really make a difference in this thing. But I did tweet this out last night. Having not yet seen the finer, and I put in parentheses any details of the CBA proposal, I can tell you that the players should ask for a bunch more. They probably won't, however. We'll see. I mean, once again, it'll go to the player reps, I think, today. They need 2/3 of that. 2/3 vote on that for it to then go to the players to ratify. If it makes it to the stage of the players ratifying, they'll pass it. They'll probably pass it. But can it get that 2/3 vote a lot of the old guard probably, I would say, would vote no because they don't want, because they would claim that they want to protect the younger generation and all like that. The younger guard, there might not be as educated as much on it. If you have a team rep that's a little bit more on the younger side, but we'll see how it plays out later today for sure.
Another element of the proposal is expansion of the playoffs, where now it's going to be 14 teams, making it 7 from each conference, and only the number 1 seed would get a bye. So that is part of the proposal as well. It seems to be that's what's going to happen, and that would be in effect for 2022, not something that would happen 2 years down the road. So I'm not personally in favor of it. I don't believe most fans are in favor of it, but that seems to be the likely scenario regardless of when this thing gets done. There'll be now 14 instead of 12 teams making the playoffs.
Yeah, it gives the feel of a watered down playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Where it kind of gives the feel of, how many teams in the NHL make it? And is that too many, or is that just perfect, or have we just come to kind of accept that being the number there?
I thought the NFL was perfect. I thought 12 or 32, that's perfect.
Right, and obviously I think we both would agree that we think 16-game schedule is perfect too. The thing, look, we're talking about a very physical sport here. We're talking about you get teams down into week 15, 16 of the season. Anyway, man, you're looking at a lot of walking wounded around there, and those can make differences in very key games because we've seen the NFL schedule makers set this up over the last, 6, 7, 8 years where they're playing a lot of those, at least one of their final 2 games is in division, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Steelers versus the Ravens. Go back through all these teams' schedules, and one of their last 2 games is an in-division game. Well, what fun is playing a key game like that if you don't have your key players?
Right. Or if there's 7 seeds now, maybe that game might not mean as much as it might have had in the past.
Yeah, I think I think the game will actually mean more potentially.
Yeah, I guess it could be either or, just depending on that particular situation.
Right. I don't hate it from that standpoint. I just hate it from I think right now I think the NFL season's perfectly long enough because of the violence of the game and the injuries associated with it.
Yeah.
So,
just having an odd number of playoff teams in general is just strange. Why have an odd number of teams?
Right. And I think, I forget, I can't find the number that I put up yesterday, but something along the lines of, hey, here's the thing. If you go back in the annals, over the course of, let's say, the last 15 years, and really the last eight seasons, the Pittsburgh Steelers really would have benefited from there being 7 teams per conference there. In fact, 4 more times out of the last 8 years, they would have made the playoffs.
Wow. Yeah, only once under those rules, if you backtracked, only once would the Steelers would have missed the playoffs under Tomlin, I believe.
Right, and that would have been 2009? Is that?
I think so.
12,
yeah. 12 and 13 they would have been in. I think it was 09, the year before they missed the playoffs.
So look, 4 times that they didn't make the playoffs. Over the course of the last 8 years, they would have been in. However, 3 of those times would have been with an 8-8 record. And I think that's some of the biggest fear, at least I have, and probably a lot of others do. How often do you want to see an 8-8 team get in there? Now,
right.
On the flip side, I went back over the course of the last 15 years, last 15 seasons. The average win total of a playoff team in its current format was something like 11.1 or something. And then the average win total had things been the same other than just a 17 from each conference making it, would have lowered that down just to I think it was 10.7 or 10.8 average wins. So you're not giving up a lot of average, much as far as, I think win average goes, but I think and the other thing that I wrote in the article the other day, I think going back 15 years, there's only been 5 or 6 teams in the last 15 seasons that have made it into the playoffs with a 500 or less record. And only one of those teams, the New York Giants, was it 2014? I don't have it in front of me. Made it as a wild card. So look, if you get a wild card, if you get a watered down, weak division, yeah, you're going to potentially have a team get in there with an 8-8, or 8 or what, obviously it'd be 17 game season. Then, it's not going to be a 500 record. You would hope that it would be at least a game or two over 500 at that aspect. So I understand why they're doing it because, hey, look, it gives you another, another wild card game per side, right? And of course the TV revenue that comes along with that. Overall, am I a fan of it? No. Absolutely not. I'm not a fan of the playoff format changing, nor am I a fan of the 17-game schedule. Obviously, with the new playoff format, only one team would have a bye, so I suppose that could keep teams interested longer as long as one team didn't run away with the thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, I think you would potentially, by expanding this playoff format, get away from potentially teams mailing in the week 17 game because they have something locked up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, under these new rules, there'll be a lot more fan bases with eyes glued to the final week of the regular season and more eyes glued to the playoffs. So I understand that it's going to make them more money, and that's the goal of the NFL. They're a business after all. I just thought it was a perfect structure, 12 of the 32. There really weren't any big problems with it. There weren't, years where, you had issues and said, there was a clamor to expand the playoff grouping. It just feels like a change for the sake of change and one that seemed unnecessary.
Well, it's all about the money.
Yeah, it.
All about the money. And the owners seem to think that they can change the playoff format, this year without even a new CBA, so going to be interesting. What they're trying to do is trying to roll this up into one nice ball in this CBA and throw that in on top of it. And if they don't get it there, I think they're going to push it through. They claim that they have the right to do that anyway without the CBA. So kind of a big day overall, I think, in the landscape of the NFL because, it certainly seems now look, I suppose that if it doesn't get the player reps approval today, you would think that the player reps could quickly fire back with some things that they need, and in other words, you get kind of the clock is ticking situation next week. Is that kind of the way you're taking it, or are you taking it that if this thing doesn't get approved by the team reps today, that's it?
I'm not sure when they're going to vote on it and how that process is going to work. Obviously, if the NFL reps, shoot this thing down, then it's not going to get done by next week. There's going to be too much of back and forth. They're going to have to kind of really go back in the details of this thing. So I think you really have one shot here on the vote, and if it doesn't happen, then it's not going to get passed for a while. That's my guess of it. So
you would think there had been some negotiation, well, there obviously has been, to get to a point where their side of it is where the owners are submitting what they're submitting, right? I mean, this isn't coming out of left field thinking we hope that the NFLPA will like these. I mean, a lot of these I'm sure have already been discussed.
Sure.
But in other words, how close, even if it doesn't get approved by the team reps today, how much give and take do you think needs to happen?
I mean, it's
impossible to answer that.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's enough that it won't get done in a week from now. I mean, the union and the NFL player side, there's no rush to get into a new CBA right now. They don't care about the Steelers situation, about the 30% rule and things like that. I mean, they can take their time with this thing. So if they don't like this deal, I mean, the best leverage any side can have is just time, and you can just wait it out and try to negotiate and kind of hold your position. So there's no huge rush from the player side to get this thing done immediately, and that will let this thing drag out a little bit.
Well, I think there is more. I think there is revenue for players to gain this season.
Yeah. I mean, it will get done soon. I mean, sometime maybe in the next couple months, worst case scenario. But
what I'm saying is there is still. I mean, you say there's nothing for players to gain this season. There actually is. Some aspect of revenue raises and minimum salary raises. There are benefits, some benefits that would benefit the players this season alone if they were to get the CBA extended and passed.
Yeah, but I'm sure their argument is that we could hold out for something better starting for next year. And again, I just don't see. I don't see the PA having to rush into doing something today if they don't like this deal.
My argument would be that there has been negotiations going on with this, and it's just not like all of a sudden this fact sheet got sent out and the players the player reps are just now looking at it, and that they're blown away by some of these things on here.
No, I'm not disagreeing with that. Sure, there's been negotiations for a while now from both sides, but still, it's not like every single thing that's ever been, every single first draft of the proposals has been ratified right away. There's been back and forth. I mean, we had a lockout the last time because they went back and forth so much trying to hammer this thing out. So generally, these things don't get done on the first try.
Boy, the whole drug clause, you might as well just let them smoke.
Yeah, I don't even. What are they doing? They're raising the level of THC, and the testing window's been shrunk down. Is that what the proposal is?
Yeah. You might. I mean, why even have one? You know?
Yeah, it seems. I guess just to say that. I guess so the NFL can say, "Oh, we have a drug policy."
Right.
Not going to save Greg Robinson though. I don't think he's going to pass the.
From my experiences, the 157. What was it, 157 pounds?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's a little bit more than personal use.
It might be distributed
for 2 years.
Unless he's got Tommy Chong in the backseat.
Oh yeah. I'm surprised you grew up watching any Cheech and Chong movies?
Nah, wasn't he in That 70s Show, right?
Huh?
Yeah, That 70s Show.
If that's the only way you know, is that the only way you know Tommy Chong is?
I mean, probably he's the classic stoner dude in every movie ever. He's always had that.
Right. Boy, growing up and having the Cheech and Chong movies, those were classic. You need to spend some time out and speaking of which, last night, and we we're not big movie watchers or anything like that, but trying to get our obviously we lost a little Finley Pearl over the weekend on Monday there, and I appreciate everybody reaching out to me, and condolences there. Means a lot there. It was obviously kind of sudden there, but we trying to get our mind off some things and watch some things. Have you seen that Elvis Meets Nixon movie from a kind of doc? I wouldn't really call it it's a satirical look of when Elvis Presley met Richard Nixon, way back in the early 70s there. Have you seen that?
No, my mom's a huge Elvis fan. I'll have to ask her. I didn't even know this existed.
Oh man, and that, obviously they've taken liberties in some aspects of the movie there, but Kevin Spacey's in it. I'm not a huge Kevin Spacey fan, but he plays Nixon in it, and Johnny Knoxville plays one of Elvis's right-hand man bodyguards in this one as well too. It is great. It is hilarious. It goes by pretty quick, and it makes you run into the computer right after watching it to see how much of that stuff is factual, and it'll blow you away. Really, really worth watching that. It's Elvis Meets Nixon, I think, or Elvis Meets, I forget the name of it, but it's easy to find on Amazon or whatnot.
Gotcha. And was a lot of it factual? Did you go look up?
Yeah. Actually, a lot of it was factual there. The whole story is just. And look, I grew up obviously in the 70s and was alive or 8 or 9 years old when Elvis passed away. I'm still a huge Elvis fan to this day. So yeah, I like to watch anything that revolving around Elvis there. And even I didn't know this story, so it really is quite entertaining to watch that movie.
I will add that to my list. All right, anything else with the CBA you want to talk about? Again, we'll get more clarity once the NFL reps vote on it. Again, 2/3 majority. If they pass it, it'll go to the players at large. Simple majority to pass that, and then it'll be ratified and put in action. My guess is it won't happen, but we'll find out pretty soon.
Absolutely. And, well, I mean, look, like I said, once again, we probably lost about half the listenership early in this show because a lot of them don't really care about the CBA. But this is very, very, very important, as far as immediate future when it comes to the Steelers as well, too. And, we don't want to get too deep into talking a lot of these bullet points or whatnot because of the fact that they might not be bullet points anymore after today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, once they pass this thing, whenever that is, you more than me, but we'll probably go through this thing with a fairly fine-tooth comb, I imagine.
Yeah. For what? And look, I mean, here we are 10 years into this current one. I still learn things about the CBA. So, the hard, fast bullet points, the things that are worth knowing right off the bat will obviously get out there. And then we'll learn about the little intricacies as the years pass there. But yeah, look, I mean, I think it's being as how I study this stuff, it's
Right.
probably more important to me than it is, 98% of the people listening to this podcast.
I don't mean to take you down a rabbit hole, but one interesting thing with the new proposal is this kind of like NBA-esque mid-level exception, right? Where you can create an additional $1.25 million in cap space for minimum 4 year, of experienced players for up to 2 guys. So you can kind of like have this mid-level exception for semi-veteran type players.
Well, yeah, I mean, like the minimum salary
Right.
benefit, right?
Is that what this is?
Well,
Just
it says increase in minimum salary benefit, creation of a new 4-year player benefit up to additional $1.25 million in salary excluded from the cap for up to 2 players. So, look, I can interpret that 3 different ways, so it's probably best that I don't.
Okay. Fair enough, but if something like a mid-level exception does open up, that would be kind of interesting, and that would obviously help a cash-strapped team like Pittsburgh.
Right. For up to, let's see, I don't know enough about that to be able to define that, so I won't.
Okay, fair enough. Well, we will revisit if and when it stays into the final thing, whenever that gets approved, and we'll certainly let you know. Hopefully by Tuesday we'll know what direction they're heading. We don't know if it's going to be a pass or fail, but we'll probably be able to know by then what direction they are going.
And I'll tell you, look, because of even discussing this minimum salary benefit and this creation of whatever this new 4-year player benefit is, it's all it's all tailored to at least keep veteran players around the league longer. Does that make sense? So to make it beneficial for teams to sign veteran players.
Right. Yeah. And to create a pathway to keep those guys around. Yeah. And I am glad they are doing roster expansion because I am upset that this proposal to cut down the preseason and cut down some of the camp stuff because I think it makes it really tough for those quote unquote camp bodies. I hate that term, but the guys that are far outside the roster looking in to have an opportunity to try to showcase, their ability. So at least expand the practice squad, expand the 53-man roster will at least help, I think, create some more opportunities for those smaller name guys.
True, but to your understanding, and I guess to mine too, we're talking about if they do add a 17th game, then we're talking about only 3 preseason games right now. Is
Correct.
that?
Yeah.
But I think as things stand right now, none of that would go into effect in 2020, right? So we're still looking at. Unless I'm reading this wrong, we're still looking at a 4-game. In most teams,
Right.
Obviously, whatever team plays in the Hall of Fame game would have 5, but we're looking at a 4-game preseason and a 16-game regular season for 2020, regardless.
Yeah. So we'll let you know what the update is. All right, Dave. We've kind of been slowly going through the Steelers position group by position group. I think a while back we did edge rushers. So let's kick over to the inside linebackers today. And obviously, we talk about the cash situation, the financial situation the Steelers are in, and what roster moves and cuts they may make. Mark Barron is obviously on that list. They can save about $5 million for Pittsburgh. More likely than not, he's going to be cut. And that kind of makes sense because I think obviously in 2020 you will see Devin Bush really have that expanded role of being an every down type of guy and taking over for Barron in dime packages.
Right. Here's the main thing when we start talking about the inside linebacker position group. Devin Bush is going to be 100%, moving forward and going to be the green dot guy and everything that goes along with that. Then it becomes what can you get done off of that? We both for quite a while now believe that Mark Barron is not going to be part of this team here in a couple more weeks. And I know Jerry Dulac, not only did Jerry Dulac kind of throw this out roughly in one of his chats, but I think he kind of doubled down on it a little bit in one of being re-asked about it again. There is no benefit whatsoever in cutting Vince Williams before the start of the new league year next month. Zero. The $400,000, $500,000 that you would gain in salary cap space is just not worth the loss of the experienced player whatsoever. Now, if you want to talk about potentially maybe cutting Vince Williams on final cut down day, have at it. Okay, because you never know what's going to come down. Maybe you draft a kid. Maybe Gilbert comes along. Maybe some of these younger guys make him a little bit more expendable. But that's not going to be the case between now and the start of training camp.
Mm-hmm.
So Vince Williams becomes that kind of player that I still don't. How many snaps can you get out of Vince Williams, assuming he makes the 53-man roster?
Well, I mean, he's basically gonna assuming Barron's gone, he's gonna be your base and nickel linebacker, and then Bush is the only linebacker in dime. So, however many snaps are in nickel in your base 3-4, that's about the number he's gonna play.
So you would expect him to really play more than last year?
Yeah, because last year he was basically just the base linebacker. Played a little bit of nickel, but it was basically what would it be? It was Vince, and I think Barron and Bush kind of split in base, and then in nickel it was Barron and Bush, and in dime it was just Barron. So yeah, I would expect him to play more because if Barron's out of the picture, obviously it's going to create more of an opportunity.
Now look, Barron obviously had his warts, right?
Mm-hmm.
But does your defense go backwards?
No, I think with Bush ascending into his second year and his sophomore year, I think your defense – first of all, I think most of the defense is going to be the same, assuming Dupree stays. So I think your defense is basically going to be the same, and it's going to be playing at a high level.
All right, beyond Bush and Vince Williams, obviously Tyler Matakevich. If Matakevich comes back, great, especially from his special team standpoint, and even greater if he comes back on a minimum contract. I think Matakevich, though, has enough value out there, LJ Fordish, if you will, that some team will probably sign him and offer him a little bit more than what the Steelers would. Look, Bill Belichick loves them special teamers, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Baltimore Ravens love those special teamers and are willing to pay probably a little bit more than that. So even if Matakevich is brought back, it's not helping you from a defensive standpoint.
Correct.
Robert Spillman, maybe a little bit different there. I think he has a little bit higher level of athleticism, kind of more of a poor man's LJ Ford. Is that fair?
I view him as very similar to Matakevich, maybe a tiny bit better athlete, but I think when you talk about backup inside linebacker situation, it's really UG3 and his ability to take a step forward in his second year, because I thought until he went down with that back injury, was having a really nice rookie season.
I look at I'm a little bit more bullish, I think, on Spillman than you are. I think Spillman a little bit more. I think you're not giving him enough credit for being a little bit more athletic guy than Tyler Matakevich is. Even so, we're talking about number 4 and number 5.
Right. Although it's interesting, I mean, could you look at the depth chart where it's Bush at the Mac and Williams at the Buck, and Matakevich, if he's back, is going to be the backup Buck, and UG3 is the backup Mac? Is that a way that they could divvy this thing up?
I suppose, but I mean, look, I think everybody agrees, you and everybody listening, we don't want to see Tyler Matakevich on the field.
Yeah, no, understood there. But I'm excited about Gilbert III's development.
I am too, just from the sheer fact of the small window of progression that we saw him make during the preseason. Because obviously we didn't get to see him play any defense. You saw him more so in a training camp setting in a defensive posture.
Mm-hmm.
What growth did you see there?
Well, let me pull up my notes on him, but I remember him just doing really well in some of those one-on-one drills where it's like tight end running back versus linebacker drills. It's obviously tailored for the offense, one-on-one, space, no pass rush and all that, but UG3 was consistently one of the best players in those drills. I just thought his overall athleticism, consistency, it was a guy in Akron where you got some really good highs and some kind of low lows, but I thought overall he was kind of a consistent day in, day out type player. Here's what I wrote as my camp recap. I gave UG3 a grade of B+. Said a great camp for one of the team's 6 rounders. Maybe a bit of a quiet start, but it quickly became evident he has a talent to get on the roster now. And long term, he has the traits to play in this league. Rangy, competitive in coverage, and better processing and tackling than what I saw in his Akron tape. His first team's value should give him the edge over Skipper, and I just talk about all that stuff. But yeah, I thought overall a really impressive summer for UG3, and that he was doing well in special teams. He actually was the leader in special team snaps before getting hurt, even more than Tyler Matakevich by a couple. So really strong first, whatever it was, 8 weeks in that summer for UG3. And again, I think he can make a really big jump in his sophomore year.
The only thing, and look, it still wouldn't have translated in any defensive snaps for him. At least we don't think later on in the season. The only thing is you wish he would have stayed healthy to be able to stay on the practice field, you know, and get those practice reps. You know, losing that, I think, kind of thwarted his development there. Now, the thing is he should know enough now that he should be able to start this next year's camp, hit the ground running. We'll see how smart he is right from the get-go. This is a guy that you would hope to see a second-year jump that maybe could potentially even a quarter into the season start clamoring for maybe a little bit of defensive playing time. I mean, that's a lot to ask out of a sixth-round inside linebacker there, but there is a level of athleticism, a level of defensive playmaking there to him that I think we saw glimpses of more so in the preseason there, and you more so a little bit in training camp there, to be optimistic that there at least is something there from a future defensive standpoint, and to what degree we'll have to find out.
No, there absolutely is something there. Again, and what I wrote in that camp recap, I still stand by. He has the traits to play on defense in this league. Got to be a good athlete, be able to cover, and he can do that. I think his processing was better, his tackling was better. He's only going to get better, of course, going into his second year. And at this point, I won't even view him as a former sixth-round pick. I just view him as probably the number 3 inside linebacker, and you're one injury away from potentially seeing serious playing time. So assuming he is in that role in 2020, he will end up playing in some form or fashion, injury, sub-package thing, whatever the case is, to find a way to get on the field for at least some amount of snaps. And I'm excited to kind of see him take that jump. So, losing Mark Barron, I'm not going to worry too much because you got Bush who's stepping into a big-time role. And I think I'm really excited about UG3, and I think that kind of can fill the need of the loss of Barron pretty easily.
What else do we have on the roster? I mean, look, Barron's going to be gone. Obviously, we're not expecting Ryan Shazier back. Spillman, they're going to need some bodies in here, too.
Yeah, again, Medikevich. I really hope they don't lose Medikevich. I don't think you can sign him for just the minimum. I think it's going to cost a little bit more than that, and we'll see if they can swing it. But I really hope they find a way to make that thing work, because I'd hate to lose Dirty Red.
Are they going to draft one? Should they draft one?
It's possible. It wouldn't come till later on day 3, but it wouldn't be the worst idea. Just trying to find guys to be competitive. Again, you got to find good athletes who can cover. In terms of other guys on the roster, it's really not a whole lot. I don't think they've really signed any future guys that can handle that role so far. So there'll be some new names in the fold in some form or fashion, but I'm just really hoping that you keep Medikevich and Bush can take a step and UG3 takes a step, and I think that group's pretty solid.
This is a position, though, where you would not be surprised if they did spend a draft pick on, right?
Yeah, day 3. I think we're probably in agreement on that. Maybe 6th, 7th round type of pick. But yeah, they could do that, and I wouldn't bat an eye about it.
Right.
Especially if they lose both Medikevich and Barron, then you're like, you might be more likely than not they would draft an inside linebacker.
Right. Okay. What else do we have? I think we covered that position group pretty good.
Yeah, and I think the last thing we're going to talk about today, Dave, Bill Barnwell always kind of does his off-season roadmaps, I believe, for every team, or at least the Steelers, and you kind of responded back to that. And this may have been, I don't know, you tell me, this was one of Barnwell's better years, because usually in the past he said some really crazy things. There's some things I certainly am going to disagree with here, but kind of walk me through his outlook on the Steelers' off-season process.
Yeah, look, I wouldn't want the task of having to write up what he had to write up for all 32 teams. Just in general, being an NFL analyst, specific just NFL. I'm not talking about the Stephen A. Smiths or these guys that have to talk about all sports and all like that, because who wants that job anyway? But who does do a good job of that overall, though, are Dan Patrick. I love Dan Patrick's show. I think Dan Patrick does such a good job. But anyway, I wouldn't want the task of having to break down. I could do it. But you'd have to spend a lot more hours on it. But for Bill Barnwell to have to go in and dissect each team and come up with a 2020 offseason plan, once again, that task is not fun. In a recent series of articles on ESPN.com, he attempted to identify what is it? 5 things that every NFL team should be thinking about as they prepare for the new league year. When it gets to the specifically to the Steelers, what I did is put down what he had to say and then kind of my analysis of his analysis. What a great country we live in, right?
What a time to be alive.
Analysis of analysis. Now, and that will allow listeners of the podcast to have analysis of my analysis of his analysis there.
You're very Inception-y here, Dave.
Very what?
Inception-y.
Okay, I'm not even sure what that means.
You never seen the movie? You never even heard the movie Inception?
No.
Really? Even I've seen that. All right.
Look. You know me. I stay buried on this damn computer and football, and occasionally I can break off like I did this last couple of days to watch some of these movies. But I'm pretty ignorant on movies in general past 2008.
Okay. Well, it's check it out. It's a little trippy, but you might like it.
Does it make you think a lot or no?
Yes. Yeah. It's one of those smart people movies.
Well, then you just ruled me out. All right. Number one, he has create cap space. Woo! Wow. Pretty safe assumption there on number one. But how he goes about writing this up, obviously cutting Mark Barron, potentially moving on from Anthony Chicklow, who he thinks the Steelers can just get to take a massive pay cut with a promise of more regular defensive snaps in 2020. I don't know about you, Alex, but when I think about Anthony Chicklow, I don't immediately think about more regular defensive snaps for him in 2020. Am I correct?
I was just thinking last night, how do I get Chicklow on the field more? How do I take Dupree and Watt, my best players, off the field and get Chicklow? Yeah, it's that he's going to be cut. He's not going to take a pay cut.
Yeah, why not just put create cap space and just write about cutting Mark Barron and cutting Anthony Chicklow and being done with the paragraph. You save yourself a lot of time that way. But he goes in there and writes about Chicklow. Look, I'm all for Chicklow going down to the minimum and competing for a roster spot, right? But even so, I mean, what's the likelihood of that's going to happen?
Yeah, I know where Bill's at, and at least he's talking about the 30% rule and how tricky it's going to be for Pittsburgh. So I think he has a basic understanding of the cap situation for the Steelers, but that Chicklow comment was the only kind of silly part of that one.
Right, and look, overall, I mean, if you read this thing, and I'm not going to say that he's definitely wrong, but the overall feel that you get from really all 5 of his bullet points here, or the collective, is that he does not expect Bud Dupree to be a member of the Steelers. It really sounds like he is expecting Bud Dupree to hit free agency a la no franchise tag.
Yeah, and I think most people look at it and say, okay, Dupree's going to cost a lot. This team has no cap space. They probably can't afford him. But if you really follow this team closely as we do, we know that there are avenues for them to get Dupree locked up or at least tag him, and that's probably the most likely thing to happen.
He does not mention in there, he mentions Ramon Foster, but, as part of this whole equation, he's got the team seemingly keeping Ramon Foster. It doesn't mention him as a potential salary cap casualty or anything like that. Not that, or especially not me. I think there's still a good chance that Vance McDonald survives past March 18th, but he doesn't even bring that up as an option. Look, I don't know how much we should expect Bill Barnwell to go deep into this thing, right?
Right, because like you say, he's got to do all 32 teams. And I guess under his assumption, if we would just pretend and assume that Dupree's gone, then you probably don't have to make some of those other cuts because you're making those cuts to get Dupree, under the tag. And if without that, then you're able to keep someone like Ramon Foster.
And at least he does know the importance of the 30% rule and the factor it plays in the Steelers potentially creating cap space this offseason. So I'll give him 2 positive points there.
Yeah.
Now, number 2, add a replacement for Dupree. Once again, it's obvious that he's looking at this as the Steelers not retaining Bud Dupree there, and that's quite a definitive statement to have as a as one of 5 here. He goes on to write, obviously and here's the thing, he goes on to a long-term deal. He expects Bud Dupree to get a long, or at least looking for a long-term deal with an average of just $14 million a season. Boy, $14 million a season seems way, way low if you ask me. And if the Steelers could get Bud Dupree locked up for $14 million a season, and knowing the way that they like to structure guaranteed money, with guaranteed money only being in the first year, I think the Steelers would sign up for that in a heartbeat, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I'm expecting Dupree to be around $17 million per year. I think you're 18 plus.
Right.
Is what you're looking at. So yeah, a little low on that projection.
Right. So he one of the reasons he just thinks that Bud Dupree's going to go elsewhere, get $14 million a season. Okay, so he undershot there. We won't crucify him too bad on that. But as far as Barnwell threw out a couple of suggestions for some off-season edge rusher potential cap casualties that the Steelers should go after, and he's got Ryan Kerrigan as one of them. Look, I like Ryan Kerrigan during his prime. However, remember that old rule that I have to write about every year because people, I guess, don't listen to it or forget it. The Steelers just do not have a long history at all when it comes to signing outside defensive free agents that are 30 years old or older. Okay, they just don't. Kerrigan will be 32 come the start of 2020, and even if you still liked him and wanted to break that one rule, he's still going to likely command too much money as a part-time player. Ryan Kerrigan's not going to give you anything on special teams, something that any backup linebacker on this roster will have to give you. His lone suggestion was crappy. All right, to say the least. So in other words, should the Steelers indeed let Bud Dupree leave next month, they're going to have to lean heavily on unproven, backup outside linebackers, Ola Adaney, Tuzar Skipper, potentially spend their second or third round draft pick on a young edge rusher to boot, and go ahead send Kevin Colbert out there into the dumpsters.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's all a moot point because I still expect Dupree to be under the tag, be part of the Steelers in 2020, and that's not gonna make any what Barnwell's talking about come into play here.
Right. So basically, overall, I've got to give him a demerit or two just for making to centering the whole offseason plan around Bud Dupree.
Mm-hmm. And his assumption that he's leaving, which seems unlikely at this point.
Right. Yeah. Number 3, draft an interior lineman. Well, not too far off there. He goes on to write about B.J. Finney being a free agent, Marquise Pouncey getting up there in age. Once again, he doesn't. He does mention Ramon Foster in number 3, but but he's got it as if Foster's playing in 2020 and their young interior offensive lineman that they would draft stepping in for him. So. He also goes on to say that the loser of the battle between restricted free agents Matt Filer and Zach Banner could kick inside in a pinch. I don't know about you, but I've not thought quite a bit about Zach Banner kicking inside the guard.
Yeah, it's never happened. Filer could, and obviously he could kick the left guard if Foster is cut, but Banner's a tackle only.
Once again, they say he wasted a few tapping of the old computer keyboard keys there by mentioning Zach Banner's. I don't know where he come up with that. He should have left it at Matt Filer, and he should have been wrote in there that Ramon Foster should be a salary cap potential casualty here, and that's another reason why you should draft an interior lineman. Overall, the preface of number 3 of drafting an interior lineman, it is not wrong.
Yeah, they're going to have to do that because Finney's as good as gone, and even if you keep Foster, depth is still going to be pretty much non-existent.
Work on an extension for Juju Smith-Schuster as number 4, and once again, this ties him hard back into Bud Dupree not being on the roster. In a roundabout way, I think you could say that that Barnwell's offseason plan revolves around the Steelers not retaining Bud Dupree, yet giving his money and then some to Juju Smith-Schuster.
Yeah, I guess. I thought this one was kind of maybe the silliest one because I just don't see the reason for Juju to do a deal now when his value's at its lowest point, and for a situation where the Steelers don't have a lot of cap space to be kind of giving this out as kind of a luxury, quote-unquote, extension right now. So really don't see this one happening at all.
Especially, well, look, I mean, Juju should do it if the Steelers were wanting to get in the ballpark of what Barnwell. Yeah, I mean, if the Steelers offered Juju $19 million per season, like Barnwell suggests, then Juju would be running. He'd probably have to be careful running up those stairs, right? Signing that thing there. Look, we're talking about a team that's already cap strapped. All right, you're taking away Bud Dupree to help free up some cap at least from a tag perspective, you're acknowledging that the 30% rule might still be in play, yet you're turning around and spending that money and more on a contract for Juju Smith-Schuster, which, by the way, if it had to adhere to the 30% rule, would make a pretty monster first-year cap hit for Juju Smith-Schuster, correct?
Right, correct.
So I don't think, to me, he's kind of he kind of put his leg around his head and put his foot in his mouth. Okay. I'm with you. And look, he did not. If you want to write about a potential extension during the offseason, why not write about Cameron Hayward?
Yeah, that would make more sense.
Because not only would Cameron Hayward, would you get something done that's probably needs to get done and should get done and will get done. It's Cameron Hayward, and also a byproduct, even under the current 30% rule right now, you might save $1 million or $2 million in salary cap space in the process there. So shame on him for look, you want to write about work to get done during the offseason and it being an extension. Yeah, it would have been a lot more believable had he put Cameron Hayward in that spot instead of Juju Smith-Schuster. He got a tap in. He got a 6-inch tap in for par on number 5 here. Pick up T.J. Watt's 5th-year option. Well,
bold one, Bill.
Yeah, way to go out on a limb there. I'm not even gonna break that down because that's a gimme. There he could just pick that one up and I wouldn't say anything.
That's like saying don't sign Alex. Yeah, good one, Bill.
I don't know. I've talked about it in the past, Alex. I want to put it out there to the listeners again. I would sign you on a minimum salary benefit contract during the offseason if I thought there was an inkling that maybe you could provide help on special teams. I don't know, maybe a blocking tight end, undersized blocking tight end.
Very undersized.
But, look, minimum salary benefit contracts are not bad for anybody, all right?
That's why you can't be GM. You'd have 47 minimum salary benefit contracts on your roster.
Yeah, and a lot of people probably not wanting to play for me at that point.
Probably.
There. But, look, what would you grade this 5-step plan by Barnwell?
As you said, it's got to be so tough. I know I could not do this for all 32 teams. I wouldn't even attempt because I would say so many things wrong for teams that I don't follow as close as I do the Steelers. So I think you got to give Barnwell a little bit of grace there. But, create cap space, that's obvious but fair. The assumption Dupree's gone is just wrong. Drafting interior lineman, that's fair. Juju extension, that's probably not going to happen. And then Watt, like you said, I liked how you phrased it, to the tap in for par. So I'll be generous and say a C+ for Barnwell here.
I was going to go with the same exact thing. I'll give him a C++ because of highlighting the 30% rule.
Yeah. He's a smart guy. I've always liked his work. It just, doing this, it just seems a little just busy work, basically. You're not going to get stuff right for all 32 teams, but something for us to talk about.
And you know what? His goal was to create talking points for people to write and talk about, and we did it.
Yep, there you go. All right.
So he achieved his goal. But I obviously would like things a lot more, realistic. There, people read the truly not dedicated fan that only reads the major media stuff and listens to the major media stuff gets so confused when they read this kind of stuff, And I think that's where our job is as bloggers or whatever you want to call us, is to come in and dissect this stuff, and talk about it. And that's what we do.
Yeah. So I think you did a good job addressing all of those things he wrote about.
Thank you.
All right, Dave, let's close out the show with some reader emails.
All right. Anything else? Didn't you write about Deontay Johnson? You don't want to cover any of that? Deontay Johnson is a punt returner? You want to say?
He might yell at me for it if I talk about it. No. I just did a video, actually, just kind of looking at how he improved as a punt returner. Just check out the video. It's about 6 minutes long. That just kind of looks at how his technique changed so he became the playmaker that did things like the 85-yard touchdown against the Cardinals.
One other thing I wanted to hit on real quick here. Zach Gentry had a good interview on Steelers.com, kind of highlighted that in a post yesterday. Zach Gentry, I'm going to be in the weight room all offseason working. Good. Because if you would have said anything other than that, it would have been the wrong answer. with him. And look, I mean, the kid only played 4 games last season, right around 50 offensive snaps. Most of those snaps came early on in the season, and they were not good, right?
Right.
I think you could find a few positives in that game against the Bills, very few, but once again, not a lot of snaps. At least he did get his first reception, or one and only reception last season in that game. But I think mostly when you look at Zach Gentry, and I did in a post several weeks ago talking about him being the biggest, kind of one of the biggest unknowns coming out. Look, I think we got a better feel of who Gilbert is, right, from the draft class, and most definitely Bugs from last year's draft class. I think exiting the 2019 season, Zach Gentry is the guy we know the least about.
Yeah, him and Justin Lane, I would say, too, because he didn't almost play a snap.
And at least Justin Lane gave you something to be positive about on the special teams aspect of it, right?
That's true. Yeah. I mean,
go ahead.
We knew Gentry was going to struggle this year. He's a raw rookie tight end, tough position to transition to in general. You knew the expectation had to be super low. So we'll see what year 2 brings. And again, that's a time for a big jump for a lot of these guys, especially underclassmen, tight end, raw guys like him. Like, you should really see a substantial, significant jump. So we'll find out pretty quickly if he has or not. But I don't want to forget him. I know we talk about tight end a lot, and I didn't love the pick. You didn't love the pick. But I don't want to forget about Gentry and this whole piece of the tight end roster.
And I guess that's where I'm going here, Alex, because you know me, I love breaking down these tight ends. I had forgot. Did you remember that I did a contextualization on his 2018 pass targets at Michigan?
I did not remember that, but it does not surprise me because I figured you did something like that.
I linked that post back in this article in this post that I wrote up on Thursday there. You go back and you look at some of these numbers of his, Alex. You know how much I like the average depth of target and the average depth of reception there. when you start looking at some of these numbers and you compare them to tight ends in this year's draft class, it makes you kind of raise your eyebrows a little bit, and it even prompted me to go back and watch a little bit of his tape late last night, because obviously I have all these contextualized linked to the actual play on YouTube, and I kind of got a little bit of I shouldn't say renewed optimism in there, but kind of like, maybe this guy shouldn't be forgot about. Or lost in the shuffle as much as he seems to be right now at this point in the offseason. When you look at him, his average target depth was just under 10 yards in his final season at Michigan at 9.96 yards. That's not a bad number. Okay, as far as an average target depth goes. His average depth of reception was actually a little bit longer than that at 11.09 yards, okay, which once again is not a bad number. That's a very strong number. And also when you look at his average, he averaged 3.3 or 3.53 yards after the catch in 2018. That's another healthy number, especially when it comes to a big boy, a big body tight end as far as him. And I think another thing that needs to be remembered when we talk about, or brought back to the forefront when we talk about Zach Gentry is, remember, this kid was an underclassman. This is a kid that converted from quarterback to tight end, and every time we talk about these young kids in these situations like that, what does Kevin Colbert always remind us about this, about kids in his situation last season?
Yeah, that they are young, and that they're going to struggle, and that you expect them to make that jump in that second year. And I'm sure that's the expectation for Zach Gentry.
All right, so what is the expectation on him, you think, right now? And are we not? I guess where I'm going here is, and I don't know if you figured it out yet. You probably have. Is there anything there with Gentry, combined with the fact that the potential of McDonald lasting on this roster and the outside potential Vidette returning? Is there an outside shot that this results in the Steelers not addressing the tight end position? I don't want to say at all, but definitely maybe not in the first, in day 2, when second, third round situation, fourth round even.
I mean, if they pick up Vance's option, which seems likely, and they re-sign Vanette, then yeah, I mean that may change the conversation. But man, Dave, that is a tough sell because who is your long-term guy? Who is your guy of the future? It's not McDonald. It's not Vanette. Is it really going to be Gentry? Is that the guy you're going to bank on to be the guy maybe as early as next year? It's a really tough sell for me.
It is, and I'm not trying to sell it.
Sure, right. But I'm just, even in their head, like, can they really justify that? Even if they keep those guys?
Well, I think you're looking at it as what would a potential rookie offer? Is there, other than a guy, like Adam Trotman, okay? A guy that you think, who is the guy that you think, and I know you're higher. I got to get back into some of Bryce Hopkins' film here now that I'm, back from a trip and all like that. And I'll definitely do that after the combine. And look, we'll learn a lot more about these kids in this next week here as well too. But I mean, is there a guy that you can see coming in and being a big difference maker, in a rookie season via the draft?
Well, I think someone like Hopkins can offer something. I mean, especially if they don't have to be in that blocking role too much year one, because you have those other established guys like McDonald, Vanette, and in a year two Gentry, and that guy like Hopkins hypothetically can just come in and be kind of a big slot receiver-ish for the first year. You can make it work that way, but it's also to the larger point of, you can't just plug and play a tight end. Like if you lose Vance after 2020 and you need to go find a rookie tight end, that guy is not going to make an impact right away. Historically, tight ends don't make much of an impact in year one, or at least it's a relatively minimal impact. So like it'd be better to draft a guy now, have him kind of play in a bit piece year one, and then next year he's ready to be the guy and emerge. So I think you got to have some real good foresight when you look at trying to address the tight end position. I'm
not saying not do it.
Yeah.
Okay. No. But I guess here's the preface of the whole thing, and let's circle this thing back to Gentry. Mm-hmm. We're going to figure out real quick what the Steelers think about Zach Gentry by August or by April. What's the last day of the draft?
Yeah.
24th or whatnot.
I think, yeah.
25th. We're going to know by then for sure what the Steelers really, I think of Zach Gentry.
Right. And I think if their projection is that he's the guy long term, I think that's incorrect. Now, we'll see what it looks in year two. I don't want to say who he is and who he isn't, but I think putting all your eggs in that basket is unwise.
I mean, let's face it, we don't know a lot about Gentry other than you probably do a little bit more from the camp setting and obviously the snaps that but I mean, the kid was an underclassman and the kid was essentially a senior last year in college, right?
Right.
So it's hard to, how much stock do we put in what we saw on tape last season?
Not much. I tell people that is you're trying to project how much better he's going to get, and that's tough for me to do. I can look at camp last year.
It's extremely tough to do when it comes to him.
And looking at camp last year is not really going to tell me a whole lot because he looked like a raw rookie. I mean, duh. So how much does he accelerate and how much better does he get? I don't know. I won't know until I get to camp. So, I mean, that's a fair point, but still, for me to project that he's the guy going forward, I know you're not saying that. Is just that's too tall of a task for me to try to do.
One of the biggest unfortunate things last year too is just from the second half of the season on, he played less.
Yeah, he played 50 total snaps on offense last year. Exactly.
And 30 something of them came within first 6 games of the season, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because what in the game against the Chargers, his final game up until he played against the Bills.
I can go through a snap. Yeah, there was the one game where I think 49ers maybe everyone got hurt in that one, and they were down to one tight end, I think.
And that was miserable blocking.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that was horrible. But I mean,
yeah. But I'm not surprised by that.
Well, yeah. Were you shocked?
No. Let's see. He played 10 against the 49ers, 24 the following week against the Bengals, 1 against the Chargers, and then 14 against the Bills. He played in 4 games last year. That's it. It's hard to really go off much.
Right, and a couple of those snaps against the Bills, I think half those snaps against the Bills were pass snaps of him not being involved. I think a couple runs, not even his direction in that game as well too. So really all we're going off of primarily is his Bengals tape early in the season and his 49ers tape, and neither of that was good, and that was to be expected there. Once again, I'm not trying to say this guy can be the guy, but boy, if there's a guy that they probably know a lot more about than we do on the outside, it's him, and we're going to get a real good awakening in the next few months of what they do think about it, because obviously if you spend a second or third or even a fourth round draft pick on a tight end, it's because you think that guy could be the guy.
Yeah, but especially for 2021, because I think to take a tight end, you got to do that a year out. You can't just plug and play a guy for next year and hope it works. It's not going to happen.
And another thing, look, obviously we talk and have for quite a while about Vance McDonald and injury concerns and all like that, and I think people too easily point back to last season. Randy didn't use the damn tight end. Well, I mean, look at the damn quarterback position. Look at everything that happened offensively last year. To me, that all gets a mulligan right there in itself, especially when it comes to tight end position. And look, is Vance McDonald the future past 2020 survives? Assuming he survives, no. But I think people are discounting and writing Vance McDonald off too quickly here.
Yeah, it just goes back to why he struggled last year. Was it his body breaking down, or was it a specific injury that hindered him? I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I have plenty of criticism for Randy Fichtner, but the idea he doesn't use a tight end is just kind of silly. I mean, in 2018, Jesse and Vance combined for 80 catches for over 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns. They used a tight end plenty when those guys were healthy and you had a healthy Ben.
I guess I should close on a topic of if people listening to this get a chance, pull up the post that I did on Zach Gentry on Thursday. Go and then find that link in there, the contextualization of his pass targets, and go back and look at he got a little bit of impressive tape as far as getting downfield and catching the football.
Yeah, now it's about, can he improve upon that? Can he improve as a blocker? And we'll find out. We'll start to find out come July and August.
Now, if they drafted a young tight end and they did re-sign Vanette, and if they did, if McDonald lasts past the start of the new league year, whose roster spots? I mean, they're not going to carry 4 tight ends on the 53.
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask about who's going to get cut here in February. I don't know. I mean, I consider that a good problem to have. I mean, you have a good competitive group. We'll see. I maybe Vanette, maybe Gentry, maybe even Vance. Who knows? I could not give you a good answer today.
Now I'm going to where's my tinfoil hat at here?
Oh God.
I'm just going to don't be surprised. Yeah, and obviously, once again, I'm not advocating Zach Gentry's guy, but if they are more up on him than we think he is, and if they don't view the top of this tight end class as being as strong as what maybe you or definitely I don't think that way. Maybe you are more apt, with the Mosses and the Hopkins and the Troutmans at the top of it, and who knows if they're even going to be able to get one of those. I don't think you can bank on the fact that you're even going to be able to get one of those guys, even if you would like one of them there. Going back to my buddy Charlie Warner. 6th or 7th round, that wouldn't be a bad direction to go if you had a little bit of confidence in a guy like Zach Gentry.
Yeah, no, I understand that. A good blocking tight end, I'll never turn that down. But again, what is the future of this position? What is the long-term outlook of this group? And a 6th-round pick and Warner, who I know you like, but is the upside really that high? That's where I start to wonder. This team needs to make an investment in tight end. The last tight end they drafted in the top 4 rounds, you know who that was? I think we had this conversation the other day. It was Matt Space in 2008. I mean, they're the only team since then to not draft a tight end in the top 4 rounds. I mean, it's ludicrous for a tight end for a franchise that's rich in history. So it is time to stop with the free agents and the trades. Let's build from within. Let's do it the way the Steelers have always done it, with building through the draft and make that heavy investment in the tight end. It's been ignored for far too long.
And once again, before I get all the hate email on this saying Dave don't want the Steelers to draft a tight end, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just trying to look at it the aspect of, is there something there more to Zach Gentry than maybe what we think is there, and because of this not being, I mean, you've seen enough of the tight ends in this class right now. What do you think about this tight end class, Alex?
Yeah, it's not a great class. There is no top-heavy, clear-cut front runner. If there was, I mean, the Steelers wouldn't have a shot at him anyway. So it's going to be kind of a flavor of the month kind of thing, where it's going to be all over the place, and each team's going to like wildly different players. So it's not a great class. I just think that it's a good class with some interesting talent, some guys that can, with coaching, become something maybe 3 years from now.
Okay, all right, fair enough. I'm just saying. Don't be. I guess where I'm at right now, and obviously got a lot more time before the draft, is don't be surprised if they don't draft a tight end early.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair point because all they basically have to do is re-sign Vinette, and assuming they hold on to Vance, and it's like, okay, well, you have tight ends. What are they thinking? I mean, that's a fair point to bring up.
Right. And look, I mean, obviously, if you let Vance go. I mean that's going to be a clear sign there. Or if they're unable to re-sign Nick Vannett, which is possible, then I mean you obviously your tight end depth chart, which isn't great anyway, really gets depleted, and then you really put yourself in a position where. Yeah, they're going to have to spend an early draft pick on a tight end.
You know my plan. Draft a tight end, second or third round, ideally. You can't force it, but that'd be ideal. And then have Vance and that guy split basically in 2020. Vance is gone after 2020, and that draft pick becomes your number one guy. That's my roadmap to fixing tight end.
All right, I know you didn't want to go this way. I'm going to make you go this way anyway because we're talking about tight ends there. You saw my contextualization on Thaddeus Moss. You obviously put up a draft profile to get the amount of comment.
120-something.
120. Kudos to you. Where's my golf clap at right here?
I didn't do it.
For a draft profile to get the amount of comments that it got, man, I don't think, have we ever had that happen?
I mean, I did sticky it to the top, so I kind of put some eyes on it. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you got a good conversation.
All right. You obviously, I think you saw my, not long before he declared for the draft, you saw my contextualization on him. And it's not hard to really go through because of 50-something total targets that he had at LSU last year. Top to bottom, where are you on Thaddeus Moss?
I think we're in similar places. There was certainly a concern about overall athleticism. I can't wait to see how he tests at the combine. You're not seeing a lot of big plays. You're not seeing a lot of stuff after the catch. I mean, he is just kind of an underneath threat. But, I mean, he's a really good blocker. He's a more refined player than you would expect, especially for limited just overall play time. And you do want to say that, this guy still might have a ceiling because he just hasn't played a lot of football. So I'll put it this way, though. Putting my thoughts aside, and again, you can read the whole article on Steelers Depot. I mean, I think the Steelers are going to be interested in Thaddeus Moss because he's Power 5. He is technically an underclassman. I know he was in there for 4 years, but is declaring as a junior. NFL bloodlines. And also, I didn't know this until I kind of researched it some more. You know who because he started out his career at NC State. You know who recruited him to NC State?
Was it our buddy Faulkner?
No, Matt Canada.
Oh, Canada, okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, and the reason why one of the reasons why Moss transferred from NC State was because Canada got fired, like right before Moss arrived on campus, and he wanted to really play for Canada. And then
I believe I read that article as well, too. Okay. I did read that.
Yeah. So, I mean, not that it means a ton because Canada is just the quarterback's coach, but somebody who probably knows Thaddeus Moss pretty well and can shed some insight on at least him in the recruiting process. So there's a lot of, as you say, the Blues clues that will connect that Moss to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, but is there enough there from an offensive value passing game? There's a lot of projection that needs to be done with him because of what he didn't do in his one season at LSU.
Correct.
There's a lot. Look, he had the nice game against Clemson. Nobody's going to deny that. Right, he had a great catch against Alabama. Showed you some things. But when you look at like his big play against Oklahoma, that was a busted coverage.
Correct.
I mean, plain and simple. If you look at a big catch that he had against Georgia, was it Southern or whoever they played early in the season, blown coverage. Okay, in that situation, I think top to bottom, when you look at him as a receiving threat and a receiving threat only. There's not a lot there that gives you that warrants a pick in the first 2 rounds. I wouldn't think. I think third, fourth round, I think is a different story there. And also, since writing up that contextualization and watching the initial tape on Thad Moss, he is a better blocker than what I initially gave him credit for. And he was used, I think you'll read in that contextualization of mine, somewhere in there, me stating the fact that he wasn't used overly much as a blocker. That's wrong. He was used more as a blocker than what I gave him credit for, and he was a better blocker than what I gave him credit for. So yes, he is more in that all-around tight end aspect. He is a little undersized though, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's listed 6'3", 249. We'll see what the length and the height is, but a little on the small side.
And that's going to be another thing that the more dynamic. Who's the tight end out of Washington?
Bryant. Right, Hunter Bryant.
Right. That guy's going to get overhyped too. Just he's going to get knocked down a peg because of measurables.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Yeah.
With Moss, a good blocker, physical, probably one of the better blockers and one of the more 1-2 type of guys. But I will say, didn't really do 3-point stance work. He was in line and attached, but almost I counted 4 snaps in a 3-point stance in the 4 games I watched. One of which was a kneel down. So I think he can improve upon that and something he can handle because he's a physical guy, but he will have to work on getting in a 3-point stance because I think even guys like Pinckney and Hopkins did it more than what Moss did.
He in no way, in shape or form, would be in consideration for their second round pick, 49th overall. Correct?
I don't want to say in no way. He's not a first round pick. I'll give you that. I mean, he's not dynamic enough to be that big play threat. I don't want to discount it completely at 49 though. I wouldn't go that far.
Boy, when you look at a lot of his receptions, man, a lot of them within 5 yards, 6 yards of the, just not an overly diverse route runner or a guy that separates or pushes down the field a lot.
Right, yeah. I mean, he's going to struggle versus man. He's best versus zone. He's a smart guy that has good hands and runs good routes and sight adjustments and stuff like that, but he's not going to be this dynamic playmaker in all likelihood. Again, he will get better, and I think I really want to see what he tests because that's going to be important, but I don't think he's going to blow into it. He's not going to run 4.5. He might run 4.7 something.
Who's going to run the faster? You think he'll be faster than Charlie Warner? Probably.
I think you're going to do a NFL Network side-by-side cam that they set up there. I don't know. I think maybe Moss will be a little bit more athletic, but he's probably going to run, if I had to guess, 4.75 is what Moss is going to run.
Why won't you watch any Charlie Warner film?
Because I was watching that Moss film. I don't want to fall into the spell of Charlie Warner.
I know. Look, I'm probably overhyping this guy, but they said I was overhyping my other boy as well too. But anyway, with Kittle there, we're going to be talking a lot more about tight ends from here on out, and definitely going to be a position group that we pay close attention to next week at the NFL Combine. All right, I didn't mean to put you on the spot on him, but I thought it was a very fair breakdown that you had on Moss. I really did. I liked it overall, and I think the readers did as well too, and that's why you got the amount of comments on it. He's gonna be really one of those guys I think that's gonna be kind of controversial. People are gonna be split on.
Yeah, it's just a tough evaluation because there's not a whole lot to go off. You played 1 year. I mean, that's it. I mean, and the backstory is a little weird with the high schools and injuries and stuff. It's just a whole lot for teams to figure out with when it comes to Thaddeus Moss.
I think there's a lot of projection needs to be in there. Normally, the Steelers stay away. Normally, when you come to early round guys, receivers, and tight ends, they like to have that production on tape. You know, a couple of years of it to boot, and you just don't have that with Thad Moss.
Yeah, but they also have not been afraid to go with projection guys just overall with their early picks. They kind of prefer the moldable lump of clay as opposed to the refined product when they're talking with their first 2 picks.
Right, but I in no way, shape, or form, and we'll see if he's not going in the first round. Right. Second round, I'm not seeing it. You know, I'm not saying that it can't happen. But when you do stack him up in this year's tight end class, because of some of the things that he's able to do blocking, he's going to be in the upper third of it. Yeah,
so we'll see. We'll keep you posted. We'll keep talking about it, I'm sure.
All right.
Reader emails. I know a long time ago I said let's do some reader emails. Let's do 2 or 3 of those.
You know me. I can go down the
It's
rabbit hole here in a hurry. All right, I'm going to have to pull this up here while you how far are we into this thing now? An hour and a half?
Yeah, about an hour and a half, 90 minutes.
All right, JJ writes in, new CBA sounds like JJ from Lexington. So thanks for the phonetic pronunciation of JJ. Could you explain in detail, or at least the best you can, how it would help the Steelers if we get a new CBA before the new league year? Now that you're down to 2 podcasts a week, I have an idea that I waited all season to suggest. Have Alex watch a classic movie that you choose, and you two have a short podcast or add to it in one of the scheduled podcasts. I bet your loyal listeners would enjoy hearing discuss and laugh about a classic movie. Just something to shake things up. Either way, love the podcast. We'll try to. Maybe I'll give Alex a little bit of Cool Hand Luke. Have you ever seen Cool Hand Luke, Alex?
No.
Man, that's one movie you got to rent us talk about there. But, JJ, appreciate that. Explain in detail. I think I did earlier in this podcast there when it comes to the CBA, getting it done, what would help the Steelers most. The prime thing everything should think about when getting the CBA done right now, where it helps the Steelers, is salary cap-wise and specifically the 30% rule. Because if the 30% rule goes away, it makes it a lot easier for the Steelers to free up extra cap space, and really would go from a fact of being able to get some of these marginal things on the to-do list done to not only getting those things done, but maybe signing, maybe getting one of those low end free agents or 2 in the door.
Right. Yeah. I think what we talked about earlier is the answer to that question.
All right, Chris Warren writes in, and Chris Warren is not a former NFL running back. Chris Warren of the who was it? Seattle. Chris Warren?
Yeah, was a kid out of Texas, big running back. Is that who you're thinking of?
Where was Chris Warren, the football player running back? How old is he now, by the way? He would be up there. He's probably my age now.
Well, I think they were.
Primarily for the Seattle Seahawks, but also played for Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles. That Chris Warren is now 53 years old, former 4th-round draft pick out of.
I was thinking about his son, so we were on 2 different wavelengths.
Yeah.
He's got his son who played at Texas, who was just in the NFL. You're thinking of we're in 2 different generations there.
Yeah, the older Chris Warren played at College Ferrum. I would have never remembered that.
With no idea there.
Do you know where Ferrum College is?
Couldn't tell you.
Virginia.
Mike Tomlin's gonna sign Chris Warren.
No. Chris Warren writes in, hey, Dave, I loved your post on Bill Barnwell's Steelers offseason plan. Hey, thanks for that, Chris. Barnwell's analysis was actually above average compared to much of the stuff I read from national sports writers. Most of the national coverage is inaccurate, sensationalized tripe. That's a big word for me, tripe. I really don't have a question here. I guess just want to point out how lucky we are to have Steelers Depot. You guys really do seem to gear everything you do towards serious fans, regardless of their knowledge level, and I really appreciate that. Thanks for a nice article, for that comment there. Andrew Gallus writes in, 17th game dreams come true. Andrew writes in, what's your dream, quirky but realistic scenario for the proposed 17th game? Mine is a 1 game a year against the Lions. Realistic because they could be our NFC North rival. Quirky because we just pick a team and play them forever, alternating home and away. I'd love for our core road trip group to have options other than Cleveland, Cincinnati to drive the party bus to. Thanks, Andy Gallus, father of 10-month-old Ben Gallus. Congratulations on that, Andy. That's a great question, Andy, of how they would do kind of maybe the rotating schedule. And I guess the only thing that they would do is, how you match up in a certain division with the team that matched you, in place in another division. I think that's how you would add the 17th game, right?
Yeah, I haven't looked at how they would do that. I haven't really thought about those logistical things. I'm glad I don't have to think about those logistical things. I mean, my dream to have a 17-game schedule is a 16-game schedule. It's my quirky answer. The only thing I could offer is it'd be fun to have that 17th game would be like at some sort of funky neutral site all the time, where they'd just be playing games at random college stadiums or wherever across the USA. It'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, good luck with that.
I know. We said we're dreaming here. I mean, it's not going to happen.
Okay.
It's my dream.
I don't know if my dream would be alone with Alex, that they leave this damn thing alone, but that's not going to happen. I think I voiced this earlier in the show. I don't like the fact that last game is potentially be a divisional game. But I mean, I understand wanting to have some sort of importance with it. Even so, do you want it to be the final game of the season?
Yeah, not. I'm just not crazy about anything that's happening in terms of the season schedule right now.
Yeah, so Andrew, I'm not sure I could come up with kind of a dream scenario there. Tony Verdream writes in, Dave and Alex, I, for one, enjoy the mocks you put on the site. Not so much if the picks are correct or not. Who cares? Boy, you're one of the few there. I wish people would look at it more of our mocks of discussing the players and the need, more so of, oh, he's not going to – that's – when I open up the mock drafts, that's the worst thing I think I could read is, oh, he's not going to be there. Yeah, trying to predict who's going to be there and who's not, especially early on in the process, is next to damn impossible. I'd rather enjoy feedback about I like this guy because of this, I don't like this guy because of this. I don't think the Steelers will go maybe position that you went there, that kind of thing there. Anyway, Tony appreciates what we do there. So at the risk of sounding foolish here, pre-combine, are we so sure there's no chance that pick number 49 will be an edge? Maybe someone like Zach Braun from Wisconsin. Isn't Zach Braun the kid that wants to move off the ball?
He's done both. Yeah, he can do a little bit. I mean, edge was only going to come and play if Dupree is not a Steeler. If he's a Steeler, they're not going to take edge. They may take an edge later, but not that high.
He goes on to write about Jonathan Greenard from Florida. Really athletic and works at a nice spin move a la Bud. Tony, did you see the contextualization of the sacks I did on Jonathan Greenard out of Florida around the time of the Senior Bowl there? And if you dive deeper in on his tape, man, that kid needs a lot of work. He's not an early round prospect in my eyes. I don't think he's going to test. He'll test okay at the combine. Probably not as good as what people think there, but I'm with Alex. Unless something happens to Bud, man, I really can't see. And even, look, you're probably a bigger fan of Josh Uche than I am, right?
Mm-hmm.
As far as an edge goes?
Yep. Well, I think he's got to be both, but I like Uche, yeah.
I mean, do you like him second round? Like him?
Oh, I think he's going to go top 50. I honestly think he probably will end up going there. If I'm Pittsburgh, I'm not going to draft him that high, though, personally.
Man, I'm not there on him yet. I got to watch a little bit more on him. He says, my reason is that even if they do not franchise, or if they do franchise Bud, what happens if there's an injury? And if God willing they stay healthy, wouldn't it be nice to spell those guys a bit more often and not have the wheels fall off? I cannot get that Chickalo missed tackle of Rashad Penny against Seattle out of my head still. And even if things do go well this year health-wise, I assume Bud is tagged this year and walks off next year, and then they're still going to have to address the position of a kid they love falls to them at 49. Could you see him going edge? The problem is just trying to find a edge that would fit what the Steelers look for that would fall to them at 49th overall.
Yeah, and this edge class is bad. It's probably one of the worst groups across the board, so it'll be tough to find a name.
Especially when it comes to those that the Steelers would want to play outside linebacker, I think.
Absolutely.
Let's see here. What else do we have here? Derek Wilson. Alternatives to Bud. Probably vaping. I don't.
Oh, look at you.
Not taking into account cap casualties. What do you think about bringing in someone like Vic Beasley or Shaq Lawson and asking them to play outside linebacker in our scheme? I think they could be brought in for about $4 to $6 million less a year, which due to our cap constraints seems much more doable. Here's the thing. I'm not a huge Vic Beasley or Shaq Lawson fan, but on top of it, with those guys, presumably hitting free agency because of this group of free agent, edge rushers not being all that attractive and being kind of top heavy, those guys are probably going to get paid.
Mm-hmm. I like Lawson more than Beasley, especially for Pittsburgh. They like their guys bigger, but the idea of let's let our homegrown talent walk and sign a more unknown free agent, generally has not served teams well, and is largely not the Steelers model. So I'm not in favor of that.
Yeah, me either. What is your biggest complaint about Vic Beasley to this point of his career?
I mean, it's not that I've watched it so closely, but a lot of inconsistency. He's a smaller guy. He's not going to hold up as well against the run. So just overall inconsistency. Oh my God, I cannot talk today. And also, I just don't think he has the size the Steelers like at outside linebacker.
Do you remember how much hell I wrote up Vic Beasley all those years ago? You remember the profile? Remember how much hell I took on him?
You weren't a big fan of him?
No, I wasn't a big fan of him.
Okay.
A little bit light in the pants.
Yeah.
You know, ability to get kind of thrown around. I think it's been a long time since I read that, but I always remember people that take issue with with getting on me on that. I took a lot of heat, I think, for the profile I did on Vic Beasley, and I think a lot of that has kind of come to fruition with him. Not that big a fan of Vic Beasley.
Yeah.
You know, maybe as a situational guy, you know, a Leo type guy, but other than that, no.
Yeah, and he's basically become just a situational pass rusher at this point in his career.
Chad Burns writes in, "Hey, Dave and Alex, I attempted to highlight Jerry Dulac in his weekly chat that because of the dead money, you technically, he is the guy, I think that Chad is the one in the most recent, he kind of I think he put Jerry Dulac on the spot, which kind of some of the things that we had pointed out there. He says his response didn't make much sense to me. He seemed to argue that their play rather than the cap numbers. I've copied in the response below. What are your thoughts on his response? And then this is Dulac's response to Chad highlighting the cap, you know, not being a lot to gain by good for you, Chad. According to over the cap, Vince Williams' dead money would make releasing him only free up $968,000. With that in mind, do you think they are more likely to release Barron with the hopes that of Vince Williams working alongside Bush this year and developing Gilbert to take over in 2021? Jerry Dulac's response was, "I don't think you understand that properly. If the Steelers cut Vince Williams, they would save $4 million in base salary, but he would still count more than $6 million against the cap." Milk, what? With the way the Steelers play defense, Williams' snaps have declined appreciably, not just slightly, a lot. Conversely, Barron and Devin Bush play a large majority of the snaps, so unless the Steelers want to play more base defense or focus more on run stopping in their sub package, which they won't, nothing is going to change with how much Vince plays.
Well, I don't get the first point about the base salary or any.
I think he's trying to say he saves the cash, you know. But, you know, you have to look at it from yes, from a cash standpoint to some degree, but a cap standpoint as well, too. And what the player, where the trade-off is, where the positive is in cutting the player from the cash cap and playing time and the overall player standpoint. And there's just nothing to be gained other than $400,000 and $500,000 after roster displacement by cutting Williams now. There's just nothing to be gained. Now, once again, do you want to have the conversation in early September about whether or not the Steelers should potentially cut Vince Williams? Sure, but not up until that point.
I mean, yeah, it's just simply not worth it to cut Vince and save. It's more logical to cut Barron and save $5 million than it is to cut Vince and save $500,000
in cap space.
It just makes no sense
because of what both players can give you later, you know, at a later date.
Right.
Period.
Yep.
Props to you, Chad. Let's see. I think we've run a little bit long here, haven't we? One last one. Hope all is well. I'm hoping that question is rather simple to answer. Please forgive my ignorance. Under the current structure of the CBA, when it comes to tagging or extended Bud Dupree, do the Steelers always need to operate under the salary cap? Meaning, can the Steelers tag, extend Bud, pushing themselves over the cap, and then make all the cuts, restructurings needed to become cap compliant, or do they need to make those necessary moves prior to tagging or extending Bud? Thanks as always, Doug. P.S. I'm hoping we see Colbert or Tomlin at Dayton's Pro Day because I would love to see Adam Trotman at 49 overall. Here's the thing, Doug. I mean, the key date here is March 18th. All right, so circle March 18th on the calendar because that is the start of the new league year. That is when the rule of 51 goes into effect, and that is when teams must be cap compliant by. Now, could they technically go over the cap? Could they place the franchise tag on Bud Dupree here, right at the start of the period there, which is obviously, in other words, can they play over the number for a couple of weeks there? Yeah, they can. But push comes to the long and short of it is you need to be cap compliant with the rule of 51 come March 18th. So all that stuff that happens over the next couple of weeks is all part of the process of getting cap compliant. So could they feasibly be over the cap, I guess, technically, with a tag or something here in the coming weeks? I suppose that's possible. Yeah, in fact, I think you got teams right now over the cap, right?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question, Doug. I wasn't even positive of the answer myself. I think I was just kind of asking about the order of operations and the procedural thing. So that's a good question. For Trotman, I would not expect Tomlin or Colbert to be there. They could send scouts out, and if they really liked him, then they would bring him in for a pre-draft visit. Generally, Tomlin and Colbert show up at bigger pro days where there are a ton of prospects to watch as opposed to just one. So if they really like him, they'll bring him in for a visit, and that's how Tomlin and Colbert can talk to him.
We don't have a pro day schedule yet. Usually that comes out Do we have any semblance of one yet?
I can hear you looking up one. I have not seen one yet, but I don't know when they get released.
Yeah, I usually right after the combine, I think is when. Look, do they have a lot of these already firmed down? Probably.
Sure. Yeah, it looked like February 28th last year is when they released the 2019 schedule. So about a week, right after the combine, we'll know the schedule.
And that'll obviously, as it is every year, be up on SteelersDepot.com as well, too. All right, you got anything else for me, Alex?
Nope, that's everything.
All right. In the meantime, we'll be getting ready. Obviously, I got some spreadsheets put together for Alex and I to fill in starting next week at the Combine. When Kevin Colbert speaks, we'll hopefully that'll be broadcast live on either Steelers.com or Steelers Nation Radio. Obviously, we'll get as much a recap as we can out of the way immediately as that happens. All the weigh-ins and all as that stuff comes in. And obviously, Alex and I are one of the few guys that really, I think, outside of the national media sites that track this thing real time in the spreadsheet. So we hope that you would spread those on Twitter, on Facebook, or wherever you do all that, because Alex and I put in look for our own good doing too. It's easy to remember that stuff when you're the one typing it in as well too. And Alex and I have done that for years now, monitoring and really tracking the NFL scouting combine live, especially when it comes to measurable numbers and things along that nature. So we'll be doing that next week. Look forward to that. You can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. You can follow Alex on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and you want to donate to the cause, go to SteelersDepot.com, hit that donate button upper right navigational bar. Also, if you'd like an ad-free version of SteelersDepot.com for $25 for one calendar year, you can have that by going to SteelersDepot.com, hitting the ad-free button upper right navigational bar. And Alex and I will be back on, I guess, Tuesday, right, Alex?
Yep, Tuesday.
As always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.